Welcome. Ziggy1X here, and I'm going to do a bit of a departure from what I normally would with my game videos that I've been doing with Near and Reincarnation, and I'm going to detour to Star Wars because I have been following the Kenobi series, and I am not going to make this a habit. I'm going to try and stay on topic for the most part because I don't frankly have the time to go into the YouTube sphere aside from just my casual enjoyment. But I wanted to take a moment to address a few things. I'm an average guy, been doing blue collar worker, family. I enjoy entertainment. I grew up on things like Star Wars and Indiana Jones. And I've been watching this show, and many thoughts have been going through my head. So I was discussing with someone online, we'll just leave it at that, about my nitpicks with the show and just the way it came about. And they pointed out to me that it's easy to criticize, but it's difficult to create. And I agree with this. I think that critics have the easiest job in the world. And so I answered that challenge. And little old me is going to go through some of my own thoughts on this. And I'm going to, sorry, I'm in a hot car right now working, but so I'm going to probably be sweating a little bit in here, but I want to keep the AC off so that it doesn't interfere with the audio. So taking one for the team here. But I'm going to go through this real quickly now that we're 2 minutes into the video. And I'm going to read this from my own writing, so I will be looking down a lot at this. So let's fix Obi-Wan Kenobi, let's fix Darth Vader, and let's fix Reva, because all three of those characters need fixing in this show. Firstly, let's begin with properly understanding and crafting the villain. This is a very lengthy review of sorts, but it's also just a breakdown of what I would do differently and how I would better follow the Star Wars canonical works that have been established before this. In the original trilogy, we learn that Vader was a cold, calculating, and positively ruthless villain. If anyone failed him, they died. If anyone got in his way, they died. We see this in in episode 5, where the underling officer body count becomes an inside joke for the audience, as Vader has no qualms with dispatching any and all who fail in their duties towards him. We also see this in his cunning for laying the trap for Luke on Cloud City, as well as his incredibly subtle use of the Force to overpower and demoralize his opponent. Instead of raw power in seizing, Luke, then forcing him into the chamber, he tricks him into a vulnerable position and then oh so delicately displays his mastery of the Force by flipping a few switches from across the room, thus activating the machine to capture Luke. Jumping over to episode 3, we see the fall of Anakin Skywalker and his becoming Darth Vader. Here we see his cunning and brutality. His first act as Vader is to eliminate his allies who could pose a threat to his power. This is accomplished by executing the leadership of the Trade Federation. He then departs to the Jedi Temple, where he proceeds to purge the younglings training with the Jedi. The second act of unbridled evil is the true fall of Anakin, and what finally solidified for the fandom of Star Wars just how evil Darth Vader had become in his opening salvo. When comparing this to this very personal act of evil, the destruction of Alderaan by the Death Star was just par for the course. It also wasn't his preferred method. He preferred to be the one doing the killing, and the one in the heat of danger. Again, we see this throughout the prequel trilogy. Anakin was always recklessly charging ahead up until the point where he was soundly defeated by Jedi Master Obi-Wan Kenobi on Mustafar. Now let's jump forward in the time to the currently running Obi-Wan TV show. It is currently episode 5. So we have not seen the final episode, but I have my doubts as to how it will play out, just based on the trajectory the show's been taking so far. I will set aside my qualms with the writing of the character of Kenobi, which are near infinite at this point. I have made many of my displeasures of his portrayal known ad nauseum. Let's focus instead on the villains and then Kenobi, because all three need fixing. and there should only be 3 characters in this show that we are focusing on: Kenobi, Vader, and Reva. All the villains so far have been single-dimensional planks of wood, with no clear motivation or even relevance to the story. Let's start with Vader, since I spent a rather lengthy time above expounding on why his particular flavor of villainy is so compelling. Vader in the 3rd through the 5th episodes is not decisive. He is unfocused, and he does not employ his keen tactical mind or mastery of the Force. And while the show tries to paint him as a menacing presence in his confrontation with Obi-Wan, then Reva, he instead just looks silly. There's no consistency in his use of the Force, no clearly defined range of power, and instead we get a badly choreographed dance in Episode 5, where he twirls about like I once did with my imaginary lightsaber, pretending I was a Jedi. He swings at empty air while Reva just does somersaults around him. Where with Luke on Cloud City, he demonstrated subtlety and mastery in his precision. In this episode of Kenobi, we have him essentially yanking a starship out of the sky, and I know Starkiller did that in the games, and ripping it apart. He leaves his enemies alive, as well as his allies who betray him. Instead of being straightforward in his plans, he weaves a Gordian knot so complex that only a sympathetic script would have allowed these plans to ever come to fruition. His plan is wholly dependent on a reckless and unpredictable underling in the form of Reva, one with questionable motives to boot, one with questionable motives that he himself questions, according to the story. And speaking of questionable motives, it is never properly explained why Reva was hunting Obi-Wan behind everyone, including Vader's backs, and how she was allowed to murder her superior officer without questions asked. And I don't care what anyone has to say about his magical resurrection in this most recent episode. Having a 3,000-degree blade shoved in your abdomen is not only going to punch a hole right through you, it will flash fry every internal organ in your body. So we have a villain with no established motivation, and the broad emotional gamut of 2 settings, namely that of resting bitch face and that of randomly yelling at those around her. She is a sociopathic murderer, and yes, it is established in this very episode as to her killing of entire families. She is despised by her fellow Inquisitors for the very reasons listed prior. She is insubordinate and generally a very unpleasant lady. But hey, her parkour skills are top-notch, so we can allow the rest to slide. In a story that is allegedly all about character arcs, she has nothing outside of a ham-fisted attempt to eject her into the youngling purge of the Jedi Temple, as an attempt to add weight to her story. Frankly, I've seen much better villain backstories more smoothly executed in my tabletop gaming days of Star Wars, Dungeons & Dragons, Rifts, Palladium, and others. Enough bitching. Let's fix this turd. As I said above, it is easy to criticize and more difficult to create. So let's take the fight between Reva and Darth Vader, and change the entire trajectory of this show so that it has a satisfying conclusion, one that upholds and honors the films and stories that came before it. As we learn in this episode, Reva was in fact one of the younglings at the Jedi Temple at the time of Anakin Skywalker's killing rampage. This actually works, so let's roll with it. Instead of taking a lightsaber thrust to the abdomen, as implied in her flashback, guys, stop with shoving lightsabers in people and then them just magically shrugging it off. It doesn't work, okay? Stop it. It killed Qui-Gon. Stop. All right, anyways. Instead of taking a lightsaber thrust to the abdomen, as implied in her flashback, another youngling takes the brunt of the impact, allowing for Reva to take a seemingly mortal blow while escaping the brunt of it. Anakin is temporarily distracted by the Jedi Overseer, and upon dispatching her, turns back to see the presumed corpse of Reva among the other younglings in the room. Reva, feeling betrayed by the Jedi for not protecting herself and her fellow younglings, she is able to escape the slaughter, then over the years gives into her hatred of the Jedi, her hatred of Vader, and seeks to dedicate her life to killing him. She is, at this point, wholly fallen to the dark side, as she uses it to gain power and achieve her ultimate goal in killing Vader. Let's jump ahead. Jedi survivors of Order 66 are successfully avoiding detection and capture. There is a traitor amongst the elite of the Empire. Vader tasks the Grand Inquisitor with discovering and dispatching the culprits. For reasons, could be any, the search for escaping Jedi leads the Inquisitors to Tatooine. This plays out much the same way as it would in the show, but instead of the sociopathic ragemonger we see here in Reva, she's much more akin to Vader, cold, calculating, crafty. By chance, she catches a glimpse of Obi-Wan, and a memory comes to her that she can't quite place. After this, she explores the Imperial archives of escaped Jedi and recognizes Kenobi. She also knew of Anakin and his fall, and was able to, through careful stratagem, discern that Vader and Anakin were one and the same. She, of course, never shared this with anyone, as it would have endangered her own life. As a youngling, she had been privy to a wide array of Jedi passing through the temple. In short, she was passingly aware of the relationship between Obi-Wan and Anakin, both being incredibly prominent Jedi. It is also important to emphasize again that Reva has very carefully guarded her background, so none are aware of her ties to the Jedi and pre-Empire Republic. This should have been made known to the audience well before the 5th episode, as it would have allowed the show to more successfully build up suspense around her character, while allowing for a proper slow burn towards her inevitable conclusion and confrontation with Vader. Instead of keeping the knowledge of Kenobi hidden from Vader, she sees it as an opportunity to bring him into the open and potentially make him vulnerable, this being Vader. For in her careful planning, she has connected some of the dots and knows that Kenobi must have defeated Anakin, and if he did it once, perhaps he could do it again. If not, then Vader would still be at his weakest after squaring off with him with his former master, thus allowing Reva her single best opportunity to kill Vader herself, and perhaps take his place as a Sith Lord. Kenobi, instead of being a professional useless person, has kept up his network of informants. So we've talked a little bit about Reva, now let's talk about Kenobi and his Jedi training. He is every bit the Jedi Master he was at the time of Order 66, and has diligently kept tabs on the Empire whilst watching over young Luke, thus performing his duties. He obviously also knows that Vader is Anakin. He is so well connected that when in fact the call goes out from Reva through Imperial channels that she has found Kenobi, he flees Tatooine and very deliberately leaves a trail of breadcrumbs away from Luke, so the less experienced and less crafty Reva can follow. After all, the very last thing he wants is for Vader to come to Tatooine and discover Luke. So Kenobi flees in the attempt to lead Reva on a merry chase. In fact, now that he is known by the Empire to still be alive, he makes to first throw off Reva and the Inquisitors, then connects with the fledgling rebellion. He does not go to Alderaan or see Leia, as this would endanger her and potentially tip Vader off to another of his children surviving. Let's jump ahead again. Obi-Wan is able to bait Vader, much like what happened in Episode 3, so let's change the course of that with what I'm saying here. He's able to bait Vader into the open, but has no desire to fight his old Padawan unless there are no other options. Reva attempts to exploit this as her chance to kill Vader, but is almost caught in doing so. She has to step back from her ambitions or risk discovery. Obi-Wan outsmarts both she and Vader and escapes undetected. She is frustrated by this, and we begin to see the mask of her control crack. She begins to become erratic. She hates Obi-Wan now and personally blames him for outsmarting her. Now she has a reason to specifically hate Obi-Wan, and not just Jedi in general, and ruining her attempt at Vader. She is now wholly dedicated, fanatically so, in his pursuit. Vader, in similar fashion, is enraged at Obi-Wan's escape, and redoubles his efforts, wholly focusing his attempt on the pursuit of his former master. His attention on the pursuit of his former master. Reva, either by cunning or chance, is able to discover Kenobi's whereabouts before Vader, and uses this knowledge to ingratiate herself to him, and to set Kenobi and Vader on a collision course again. Now we arrive at the final battle that was portrayed in the 5th episode. Obi-Wan, backed into a corner, is left with no other choice but to square off against Vader. The Dark Lord of the Sith. Wow, the Dark Lord of the Sith. Such an easy thing to say, but I still mess it up. The Dark Lord of the Sith, much like in Rogue One and Empire Strikes Back, is an unstoppable force. Rebels fall before his onslaught, and nothing stands against his skillful use of the lightsaber. Reva lurks in the shadows. Vader, wholly focused on Kenobi, is unaware of the imminent betrayal. At last, Vader corners a robed figure, brandishing a blue lightsaber of his own. But something is off. Throwing back the hood of his cloak, the Jedi reveals his countenance to Vader, But it is not Kenobi. It is another Jedi who is also escaping, but chose to stand and wait for Vader, sacrificing himself to allow Kenobi the best chance at defeating the Dark Lord of the Sith. Vader tries to end the contest quickly, but the Jedi, while certainly no equal in raw skill or power, nonetheless is a cunning and capable foe. Reva, enraged by yet another deception, engages at Vader's side, seemingly to dispatch the Jedi alongside her master, but suddenly and without warning turns on Vader mid-contest. Vader is caught by surprise, is dealt several glancing blows on his armor, then changes tactics to engage enemies on two fronts. The Jedi, every bit as confused as Vader, but welcoming the aid, engages Vader in earnest. Seeing this as his best chance to survive, we see here the unparalleled command of both Vader's mastery over the Force as well as his lightsaber skills. This is, as any proper battle with Vader should be, confined to narrow corridors, where maneuverability is limited, and the sheer presence of Darth Vader fills every empty space, making everything around him feel claustrophobic. Reva and the Jedi are not working together, though, and Vader is able to dispatch the greater threat in the form of the Jedi before turning his full attention upon Reva. It is at this moment that she is finally overcome by her emotions. She, so carefully guarded all these years, breaks. She screams at Vader, "You killed them. You killed them all." At this, Vader pauses in his relentless assault and simply stares at the sobbing and panting Inquisitor. "You were there." Realization dawning in his inflection. "How did you not die?" But this quandary is short-lived as Vader says, "No matter. I will finally end what I began all those years ago." The battle resumes, with Reva recklessly throwing herself at Vader, but she is outclassed in every way, and Vader in short order disarms her, quite literally disarms her. Fallen to the ground and missing her arm, Vader glances upon the fallen Inquisitor, and he cocks his head ever so slightly sideways as he looks down upon her, remembering his own similar defeat at the hands of Dooku. Raising his lightsaber, he swings to deliver the killing blow, but instead, red meets blue. And in that manic light is illuminated the serene visage of Jedi Master Obi-Wan Kenobi. Vader, distracted by everything that had transpired, is caught off guard. He quickly steps back out of range and takes a moment to assess his surroundings, so not to be caught unawares again. In this moment, Kenobi turns to the stunned Reva, then with unwavering compassion says to her, "Please forgive me. No, please forgive all of us, young one. We failed you, and it is a burden I will carry for all of my days. Allow me to protect you now as I should have done then. Go, turn away from your hatred. Find the light. Now go, I will deal with this one." Walking forward with purposeful strides, Jedi Master Obi-Wan Kenobi salutes his former Padawan and brother. Reva, stunned and wounded, just looks on at the two. "Anakin," says Kenobi, "we don't have to do this." Vader replies, "Anakin is dead." He returns the salute to his former master. "You have failed, Obi-Wan. I have all but ended the Jedi, and you are all that is left. When you are gone, only I will remain. No tricks, no high ground. I am not the same as you once knew me." Several blows are exchanged at this point. "I am no longer that reckless youth. He is dead, and you helped me to kill him. Now you can die knowing that your hands helped to craft the terror dealt by my own." More blows are exchanged, with Vader testing the abilities and responses of his opponent. Let us not forget that although Vader is powerful, his last encounter with Kenobi ended with his sound defeat, so there is hesitation. Kenobi shows what a decade of continued Jedi training can accomplish. Although he regrets the past, he has come to peace with it through communion with his own fallen master and the sharpening of his mind and will in the Force. He demonstrates this by exuding confidence and calm precision. Many of the tricks that Vader would use upon Luke in Episode 5, Kenobi uses upon Vader, thus demonstrating his own precision and mastery of the Force. Vader will remember and eventually employ these tactics himself. Reva, finally coming to herself after witnessing the peerless skill of two masters, flees the scene. She retreats back to the rest of the Imperial troops, then orders their retreat. "Lord Vader is dead," she exclaims to the assembled stormtroopers and officers. "Obi-Wan has killed him." She hopes that the shielding within the rebel bunker will prevent anyone on the orbiting Star Destroyer from establishing contact with Vader. She is willing to risk it. Vader must die. Her gambit pays off, and the officers are unable to reach Vader. The Imperials board the shuttlecraft, then depart the surface. Now that she is no longer in harm's way, she orders a bombardment of the rebel base under the pretense of killing Kenobi. This is the chance she has been waiting for. It was worth it. Down below, the contest of will and skill continues between Vader and Kenobi, and a clear victor is not apparent. This fight can just as easily swing either way, and Vader knows this. The Dark Lord of the Sith experiences fear. Then the bombardment begins. We can leave the rest to the imagination, but this final act does a few things. Firstly, it gives us a meaningful story surrounding Vader and Obi-Wan, while allowing for Reva to shine as a character in her own light. What happens to her after this is anyone's guess. Maybe she is arrogant enough to believe that she has successfully ordered the death of Vader, then is summarily executed by him upon his return. Maybe she fears that she has not succeeded, and so she flees. This would open up a story for her, while she could experience an earned redemption arc, while also allowing us to explore her as a character on the run from the Empire and Vader. And we, as the audience, could grow with her as a character. Most importantly, what this alternate narrative does is it maintains the established canon of characters and stories that have preceded it. When the events of Episode 4 finally do roll around, Vader will in fact still have seen Obi-Wan Kenobi as a master in their previous fight. We will see the beginnings of the Zen-like Kenobi that we are introduced to in A New Hope, and the dialogue between he and Vader will continue to make sense in context with the show. Also, the exchange between Tarkin and Vader will have added meaning, as Vader will have assumed all these years that his former master, the one he feared in their last encounter, perished during the bombardment that he himself barely survived. So much of the subtle dialogue we took for granted in Episode 4 will now have added weight, and we can revisit these classic scenes with an expanded appreciation for the characters and their history. A good story adds to those who have come before it. It respects story and character. If this purpose is not foremost in the minds of the storyteller, then they do the story a grave injustice. I fear this is what we have experienced in the portrayal of Obi-Wan Kenobi, a cultural vandalism of sorts, perpetrated at the hands of those who do not appreciate the awesome privilege that they have been given in being allowed to craft these stories for future generations. If one does not respect and build upon the great works of those who have paved the path, and seek only to make a name for themselves, or to further their own ideals, then they have failed in their stewardship. If a nobody like myself can craft a compelling, consistent, and coherent narrative, then why on earth not a professional with all the resources of Lucasfilm behind him? And that's all I got on this. So, for all who watch this, I hope you enjoy it. I hope you understand why I have the opinion that I have. And if you disagree with this opinion, that's fine. If you agree with my opinion, that's great. I'm just a regular guy. I'm a fan of these stories, and I want what's best for them. And I want to see a fandom in Star Wars reunited in their appreciation for the love of these stories, for good storytelling, for consistent storytelling, and just for good old-fashioned fun. So I'm going to leave it there. My next video probably won't be about Star Wars. It'll probably be about my normal gaming stuff. So I hope everyone has a lovely day. Hope everyone has a great rest of your week and weekend. Enjoy the summer, and may the Force be with you all. Peace out.